That's literally the most wholesome thing I've ever heard any of my guests say. That is so precious. It makes me so happy. Sorry, this is embarrassing. I'm getting all emotional.
No,
Oh
it's
no.
okay. I was getting
Okay.
emotional there too because I'm just like, oh my goodness, I remember why I made this series and why I was sobbing at the end of season 2.
Hello, fellow Webtoon fans and creators. I'm Audrey, and this is the Webtoon Wave podcast. I have a really awesome guest today. I'm super excited to interview him. He is the creator of To the Stars and Back and soon Superfish on Webtoon. Welcome, PEGL0. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Yes, I'm so excited to get into The Stars and Back, to talk to you about your journey, how you got into webcomics, and just all of it.
Yeah, this is it's going to be fun. I love talking about my stories and what my art. I talk nonstop about it. So now there's a actual
Perfect.
place for it.
Perfect, because I love listening. Awesome. Okay, so to get into it, for our listeners that have never read To the Stars and Back, can you give them a synopsis of the story?
Yeah, sure. To the Stars and Back is like a fluffy slice of life boys love romance. It's about a grumpy introverted guy named Kangdae who meets a bubbly, friendly, extroverted guy named Bosan who moves in next door in the same apartment building. It starts off with Kangdae being kind of cold to him, but he softens and opens up to Bosan throughout the course of the story, and eventually they form a romance. It's an opposites attract romance that goes from strangers to friends to lovers, and it's currently completed. First webtoon finished. Let's go.
That's amazing. Yeah, so anyone who is into BL and wholesome romances, go give To the Stars and Back a read. He just completed it, which is super exciting.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so happy.
I bet it's relieving too.
It is like definitely taking a break at the moment, but seeing something finished is
Hmm.
so rewarding to see because I've never finished like an actual comic before. I've started so many. So seeing something actually finished is such an amazing feeling. It's an achievement.
Yeah, so tell me about how you got started into webcomics.
Always loved doing comics ever since I was a kid. So when I was 10 years old, I decided then and there that I'm going to make comics as a job. And ever since then, I've never wanted to do anything else. So I've just been working on bettering my skills in like storytelling and art ever since then, and trying my best to make something that I felt would work for like an audience and for myself. And I feel like I didn't really hit that stride until I found Webtoon as like the platform. And then I was like, oh wow, so if I do well with my Canvas series, maybe it might get picked up by Webtoon Originals. At that time, I wasn't really sure how it 100% worked, but I heard that that's what was happening.
Hmm.
So I tried my luck at it, and I feel like I got very fortunate because I did get like somebody reached out to me to make it into original, and I'm so happy that I got that opportunity. But it felt like a dream come true because that's all I ever wanted to do, was to make comics and to share it with an audience that hopefully likes the same things that I do.
Yeah, that's the hope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me about the process. So you had your Canvas version of To the Stars and Back. Tell me about the process and what that looked like moving from Canvas to originals, like the art, maybe the storytelling.
So there were quite a few changes, both in process and also with just getting used to the fact that now I'm uploading or trying to upload at the time to a very strict deadline, which when I was on Canvas, it was more of a loose deadline because obviously nobody's policing that. Um, so I had to be a little bit more strict with that. And the episodes were definitely a bit longer. I know that To the Stars and Back has shorter episodes, but they were even shorter on Canvas.
Hmm.
But I actually started To the Stars and Back on my Instagram. So in
Mm.
2020, in everybody's favorite year, that we we I started it on my Instagram as just something fun that I wanted to do. I had no intentions at all to make it into a series. It was just something that I did because I wanted to play around with a simple art style and the fancy coloring, because I like to call it like a sunset palette because it's very like
It's
orange and pink.
very warm tone, yeah.
It is, but I love it. So I was just playing around with it, but I realized that people had like a really positive reaction to this stuff that I was making up as I was going along. And I realized that I really enjoyed it. So that's how it kind of ended up being more of a series, and I uploaded it to Canvas. But the process of turning it into a fully fledged, hopefully to be completed webtoon was really difficult, but it was also really fun because I had to make sure that my plot points made sense and that everything kind of flowed. And I had to make sure, this was like one of my least favorite parts, and I think it will always be, is trying to fit the story within a certain number of episodes. So like season 1 was 101 episodes, and I had to try to fit it within that
Mhm.
sort of section. That's probably the hardest part, but I think I'm getting a little bit better at it.
Yeah, I would assume that, you were never planning on having it as a serialized kind of thing, and then suddenly having to, like, have a structured story. How was it working with your editor? Like, were they super involved, or they just kinda give you the reins to do what you'd like?
So my editor is really great. So she helped me a lot at the beginning. We did a lot of drafts, we did a lot of stuff, and she kind of just made sure that the story was going where it should be, in terms of like making sure that every episode was interesting, it was engaging. Because I haven't done it to that level of professionalism. There's a lot that goes into it. Like you got to make sure that every episode has something that happens that's interesting, and so she would kind of help me with that, and she would help me with making sure we get the most out of each of the panels so that they make sense. And she did that for a while. Like I would share drafts with her and everything. But once I started to get settled and I started to feel a little bit more confident in my abilities, and she could clearly see that now I know what I'm doing, like I've picked up on all of the advice and the skills so far. About halfway through season 1, she kind of just gave over the reins to me and was just like, you know what, I feel confident with what you're doing,
Mhm.
so like now you can kind of go off and do it on your own. And I kind of I prefer that approach. Like I want to learn as much as I can from doing webtoons. Like I always want to learn and get better at storytelling and paneling and structure and everything like that. So having that help at the beginning of just really intensely like watching over what I'm doing to make sure that everything is the best that it can be. And then when I feel like I'm a little bit more confident, just let me figure it out myself, and then learning through the experience and problem solving by myself instead of having somebody that like holds your hand to make sure that everything's perfect as it should be. So I really like the way that she does that. That works the most for me, but obviously not everybody has that sort of experience. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that an editor can help you, but that's how she
Mhm.
helped me, and I really like that.
Yeah. Was it nerve-wracking to present your story to them for the first time? Like, when you had to pitch it
Oh,
and everything?
absolutely. Absolutely. I was terrified because I was like, I saw what was on Webtoon, and I was just like, no, it's like it's really more low key, it's kind of chill. Like, what if they don't like that sort of stuff? Because back in the day, like when I launched my To the Stars and Back series, like slice of life was not really a big genre. There were
Mhm.
very few slice of life webtoons that had story based plots.
Mhm.
More of them were kind of like the little fun daily comics or more of a really casual slice of life. I feel like I was one of the first ones that had a story driven slice of life that kind of followed a plot. And so I was really worried that because I was following a plot compared to all the other plots on Webtoon that were like really dramatic and interesting and everything like that, I felt like, oh, well, what I have to offer them isn't really like big and exciting and grand. So I was like, I hope that the charm of it and the art style itself kind of convinces them that there's something there. But I was terrified because I really wanted to be greenlit, and
Mhm.
it's never confirmed that if you get an offer that you will be greenlit. There's still a chance that
Mhm.
they could be like, you know what, like it's not really what we're looking for, but thank you so much, and then you can go on your way. So I was like, please, please like it, I'm begging you. And they
Yeah.
did, so I'm very happy.
Good. That yeah, I feel like that would also be nerve-wracking because y like, I mean, you said you started doing webcomics when you were, like, 10,
Yeah.
but it wasn't anything that was, like, super like, a solid story, right?
No, and I never finished any. Like, this is the
Mhm.
first one that I've ever finished. I've
Yeah.
started so many comics and I've done so many comics, but going through the entire process of like beginning, middle, and end, this is a first for me. But I think it went pretty well. I'm very happy with it. It's not perfect by any means, but I feel like for my first go, I'm really proud of it.
I gotta say, when I first picked up To the Stars and Back, I was already very hooked because I love the art style. Obviously, I'm a webtoon creator, I'm a very visual person. So I was already hooked on the art style because it's simplistic, but it's beautiful.
Oh,
And
thank you.
then I got introduced to Kangdae and Bosan. Like, I loved how wholesome everything was. Like, I know you said you think it's not perfect, but from a reader perspective, I have just adored the entire story that I've read. I
Oh,
love the
I'm so
characters,
glad.
the art style, the way you compose panels. I could go on and on about it all day.
Oh, thank you
But
so much.
it has traits and, like, it has a charm that a lot of other originals that I've read that don't have. I feel like there is so much intention behind the storytelling that you created.
Thank you so much. No, that means a lot to me because I always worried about like, oh, how simple it is. But over time, like that was kind of the charm that I loved about it. That because I don't make stories like this. This is like out of my comfort zone.
Mhm,
Normally what I make are the types of stories that are big and dramatic and full of stuff. So trying to do something that is really low key and calming and chill and fluffy was a really good challenge for me because what To the Stars and Back taught me was how to show restraint and how to pull back because the like big epic moments that happen in To the Stars and Back are important, but knowing how to pull back and allow the characters to just spend time with each other simply, having those little domestic moments or the little fun moments where they're, talking to each other or connecting through their interests. I had to find ways to make that interesting without it sounding like something that would be like, okay, let's just move on to like the next big event because they're not really doing anything. It taught me so much about trying to keep those moments intact
mhm,
instead of just throwing in a bunch of drama, which is why I don't tend to dive too deeply into the traumatic aspects of the story. I didn't want to show any of the abuse or show any of the bullying or any of the really hard hitting moments because I feel like that pulls away from the story and from the vibe and the genre that I really wanted to go for. So it taught me a lot of restraint and when to go forth with moments and when to just pull back. And I couldn't have gotten that from just making my normal big stories. But now that I've learned that, I can bring that into my next story and my next webtoon that I want to make because now I know when to make things a big moment and when to just allow the characters to just sit. And I didn't know that before. I didn't know how to do that. So I offer a lot of thanks to the Stars and Back for teaching me that.
So, it might be a hard question to
Mm,
answer, but what did you do during that time to kind of, because like, before you launch to the Stars and Back, you were in that process of creating the entire story.
mm.
But where did you learn to apply the like restraint that you had when you were writing it?
So, first of all, when it was very early on in the process of discovering what I wanted to the Stars and Back to be, I did play around with the idea of it being like angsty or really comedic. And so when I decided that I wanted to make it a really chill slice of life, one of the many things that I did was to read a bunch of chill slice of life manga and watch a lot and see how they deal with topics or how they deal with the plot, and trying to emulate the same vibes as that. And so when I was kind of jotting down the plot points that I wanted and figuring out where I wanted to take each of the arcs and, of course, the ending, I kept in mind with every single time that I wrote something was, does this fit in with the genre? Does this show what I want to show through that? Or am I just going a little bit too crazy and turning it into something that it's not? And so a lot of the examples that I would look at would show the type of restraint. One of the biggest ones that I looked at was an anime. I'm not sure if you know it. It's called Kotaro Lives Alone.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it already. But it's basically about this little kid who lives alone in this small apartment building surrounded by other adults. And through the course of the story, it slowly unfolds the state of where he's at. Like, why does he live alone? What happened? And you realize that through the story, there's some really sad moments. But the way that they deal with that is you have to pay attention to the story to pick up on the backstory of this little kid. And I realized that's perfect for To the Stars and Back. I want to learn how to do that. I want to be able to tell the story of my characters' backstories, their trauma, through their actions, through the way that they behave, through tiny little details throughout the story, that people that recognize those behaviors, people that have gone through the same things that they have, will pick up on that. And I write the story for them so that they find comfort in the fact that my characters have gone through the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to think of how you're presenting these characters, you know, giving them the traits that a lot of people would relate to. And what I thought was really beautiful about To the Stars and Back with Kangde especially was you weren't showing his past trauma in just one big scene or chunk. Like we were getting snippets and we followed Kangde on his way to like remembering exactly what happened,
Mm,
and I thought that was a really, really beautiful way to go about doing it because you're not holding the audience's hand, like we're discovering it with him in that sense. Like I felt like Kangde and Bosan were like characters that could be real, you know.
thank
Um
you.
yeah, and I did want to ask, how did you decide what traits to give them?
So I always love giving my characters small parts of myself. So it doesn't matter if it's like a side character or a villain or anything like that. I always like giving them parts of myself, even if it's like this really small, kind of insignificant detail, because it helps me write my characters better. It helps me connect with them better to be able to see them as people and kind of breathe life into them. And with Kangde and Bosan, I added probably the most about of myself in these characters than many of my other stories. To the Stars and Back has become a really personal series for me. And it's because I've put so much of myself, not just with their like personality traits or like little bits and pieces of them. Like with Kang Dae, he's autistic and he likes writing and he struggles with like interacting with other people, and he is sensitive to sound and stuff like that. That's definitely me. And for Bosan, he loves drawing and he's short and he's talkative and he just wants to try to be friends with people and doesn't always understand that not everybody is a good person because he sees the good in people before the bad. And it's stuff like that that I try to put into my characters to make them feel more real, because if I understand them, I can write them better, and then because I can write them better, people understand them. And so
I mean, you
I
did it. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go.
I was just saying you did it so well too. I mean, like I said, they could totally be real life people with, they're very relatable characters, and I really appreciate that as a reader. Like, me personally, I don't necessarily like to read that many stories where the protagonist has, you know, just not realistic traits. I couldn't see
Mm,
myself in them. So that's what I really appreciate about, Kang Dae. And, even with their like dynamic, like what I really loved too was that Posan was able to open up Kang Dae's mind to people, and also
mm,
just seeing how Posan was positively affecting Kang Dae. Like
yeah,
Kang Dae was able to apologize when
yep,
he did something wrong, and
mm,
I really appreciated that about their relationship too. Like they're growing
yeah,
together.
absolutely. Because in that instance, because I it was very like important to me to show that what Kang Dae was doing at the beginning with being rude to people and everything like that is not an excuse, but just an explanation.
Hmm.
And when he apologized to Bosan or realized like his bad behavior, he realized that he became the type of person that hurt him in high school. And he
Yeah.
could see that through reactions with Bosan, who just genuinely wanted to be around him.
Hmm.
And that's kind of why he apologized. And I really wanted to show that it's not supposed to take time for you to not be an asshole. You have to apologize and change. That's why Kang Dae actively, after he apologized, became a better person and started working on himself, because what he saw in Bosan was like, he didn't do anything, and I'm just being me. This protective measure that I accumulated over the years from being bullied so that I'm protecting myself is no longer applicable. No one's attacking me. And that's kind of where he came to terms with, and he started to open up a little bit more to people through Bosan. So that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna ask how did you go about creating like just this amazing chemistry between the two? Because I like the whole time, like it's really rare that I am so engrossed in a story that I'm fangirling in my room late at night, where I'm just like squealing from excitement. Like I want to know, how did you do that so well?
That's me when I was writing all of the dialogue. Just absolutely freaking out, like, hee I can't wait to show them this.
That's amazing.
So I like to act out the scenes. So
Mm,
what I do is I have a a scene that I really like, and I've written it out, and it sounds really good on paper. And what I'll do is I'll just like stand up and act out the scene. So obviously, if there's
mm,
multiple characters in the scene, I act out both of them. And I just say it out loud. I act out each of the actions as well to see, does this sound believable? Does this feel really like relatable coming out of their mouths and how they behave? And I find that so many times I've written something like, yeah, that sounds great. That's amazing. And then I like act it out and I'm like, this sounds terrible. We need to go back to the drawing board.
mm,
And that's one of my biggest things that I do with writing dialogue and character chemistry is I make sure that it sounds normal when they're talking. Not just with like Kangdae and Bosun, but even some of my favorite interactions between Kangdae and Kyo. Like
Mm,
their bickering and banter is
yep.
really fun. A lot of this is like a little secret, but a lot of the dialogue, like the romantic dialogue between Kangdae and Bosun, is actual conversations that were inspired by me and my partner. So a lot
Oh,
of
that
the
is so
romantic
precious.
moments, yeah, there's quite a few instances where those lines were used in our conversations. So that could
That is
also
so
be why.
cute. That's actually so adorable. Oh my gosh. No wonder. Oh my gosh.
So
No
like
wonder they all sounded so like natural and
it's like actual romantic lines. Like that line at the finale for season 1 when Bosun is like, I think you're an amazing person, and I hope one
yeah,
day you can see what I see in
yeah.
you. That is an actual line that we said to each other.
Oh my gosh. I cried when
Yeah.
I read that because I was like I
Yeah. And there was another
oh
line
my
where it's like, do
gosh.
you have any idea just how loved you made me feel? I said that to
I
Renya one day.
know. Oh my god.
So I'm like, what's like the best way of getting romantic dialogue? Use your partner and your relationship as inspiration.
That's literally the most wholesome thing I've ever heard any of my guests say. That is so precious. It makes me so happy. My gosh. Yeah, well, it definitely
I'm
it
glad. I'm
definitely
glad. It,
worked.
I'm glad it comes through. I'm glad it works because
It
I love doing
absolutely
it, and I'll
does.
probably keep doing.
Please do. Please keep doing that. Yeah, that's incredible. I think that's really good advice for creators if they're struggling with maybe the dialogue aspect
Mm.
or maybe even just the scene, like the
Yeah, definitely.
what do they call it? The stage directions of it
Hmm.
to just act it out in
Yeah, it's a little
their
bit
room.
cringe, but you'll get over it. Like
Well,
the payoff is good.
yeah, well, exactly. Like it helps you like saying the dialogue at least out loud helps you
Yeah,
know if it sounds good and it sounds like something a real person would say.
exactly. Yeah, because it just what it does is like it reinforces because you're hearing it twice coming out of your mouth and then into your brain.
Hmm.
That's something that my English teacher would always tell me when I had to give like speech presentations. She'd be like, don't just write it, practice it. And I'm just like, thank you. I will also use this in my, creative writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because when I read those scenes, I was just so impacted by it because, like, it's like it shows just how healthy of a relationship that Kangdae and Bosan have. They lift each other up, they bring out the best in each other. Kangdae was giving Bosan enough time to, like, figure out his stuff and be like, I'm here for you. Like,
Yeah.
but when Kangdae wanted to go see his favorite writer,
Yeah.
and the whole day was going not great, but well, maybe not the whole day. Like the disappointment of, they had to wait an extra like 3 hours,
Yeah.
and then they go on their like little date, and Posan is having such a great time, and Kangdae the whole time is like, stuff is going wrong, it's
Yeah.
gonna go wrong, and Posan is being so like positive and trying to be like, hey, like don't get your hopes down. This will work out. We can make something work out. And Bosan was
Yeah.
like trying to make the best of it, and they're doing stuff together. Like I really love that about Bosan. He is really positive, but not in like an unrealistic way, right?
Yeah.
But
He's
yeah,
he's
that
always going to be a cheerleader for everybody. Like he sees the best in most people, which in some cases can be bad because sometimes
that's
it
to
means
a
that
fault.
he
Yeah.
is pushed around or used a little bit, taken advantage of. But yeah, that's definitely something that I wanted to make sure with Bosan was that he was positive, but not in like a way where he dismisses feelings because we all
Hmm.
know somebody that's like the toxic
Toxic
positivity,
positivity.
where it's just like, hey, I'm really struggling. It's just like, hey, it'll be better. But knowing when to say, hey, things will be better, and knowing when to just listen is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that Bosun wasn't just happy-go-lucky 24/7, that he had
Mhm.
struggles, that he was not always perfect, or he made mistakes, you know? And when Kangbae was struggling, he didn't like try to push things off constantly, saying everything's just going to be fine. But he really just wanted to make sure that while he supports Kangdae with, you know, giving him the hope, that he wants to make sure that Kangdae also can process whatever it is that he's feeling.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it was really important to me that Bosa wasn't just, yeah, I'm happy and that's all I ever am.
Yeah, he wasn't a
Because
caricature
exactly.
of that, yeah. And I'm glad, like, and you maintained that those character traits. They didn't become caricatures of those traits. You like maintained the realism, you maintained the likability. Like all of the characters are likable
I'm
too.
so
Like
glad.
there wasn't a single character that I was like, oh, I don't like you. Like, if that makes sense. You gave
Oh,
them,
I'm so glad.
yeah.
The other character that I like really hate is like the library guy, but he's also really funny. Like he's
Yeah.
fun to draw as well. He's
Yeah.
just kind of an idiot,
Mhm.
but yeah. I think some of my favorite dialogues to write was when Kangdae and Bosun were having like domestic moments where they were just kind of hanging out together, because
Mhm.
it was really important to me that I didn't just show the romantic side, but I wanted to show that they are best friends as well. That not
Mhm.
every conversation they have is about the romance, but sometimes it's about what they like, what they do, and you know the struggles that they have. I'm a very big believer. Not everybody like believes in this with relationships, but for me personally, and I like to put this in my stories as well, is that my partner also has to be my best friend, and I really wanted that to be the case with this.
Mhm.
So it was important to me that they didn't just have flirty romantic moments, but they also had awkward moments, and they also had just moments talking about regular stuff. And that was some of my favorite like dialogues. Like for instance, the episode where Kangde and Bosan are just kind of talking about what they like and what they dislike in season one. That episode where we finally get a small like bit into Bosun's sort of artistic nature, because they have
Mhm.
that first conversation about Elig, that
Mhm.
which became
That was
a
really funny.
common running joke, was that Kangde
Yeah.
wanted to see Elig.
Mhm.
But I really liked that episode because they were just going back and forth asking each other questions about, you know, Bosun Bosun's art and Kangde's writing, and I wanted to show them being supportive of each other's hobby. So Bosun wants to read the stuff that, you know, Kangdae writes, and Kangdae likes seeing the stuff that Bosun draws, even though neither of them 100% understand it. Like Bosun doesn't write and Kangdae doesn't draw, but they're
Yeah.
still really passionate about hearing about each other's hobbies. That was really important to me as well.
Yeah. And even Poseidon at one point drew a little comic strip for Kangde's story. I
Yeah,
thought that was so cute. It was
he was so
adorable.
into it. He was just like, because that's kind of his love language as well, is
Yeah.
doing acts of service. So you'll constantly see him like drawing something for Kangdae, or cooking something, or baking something. That's kind of how he works.
Mhm.
So especially with the art, even sometimes drawing Kangdae himself,
Yeah.
which often gets clocked. Like, why are you drawing him? Suspicious.
Well, like that one scene where Kangde sees the drawing that Posan did of, and he's like, "Is that how Posan sees me?" And I was just like,
Yeah,
"Yes, it's how he
that
sees
is.
you. You wonderful person."
Yeah, Kangde is just like, because he has such a negative view of himself.
Yeah.
And so when he sees the way that Bosun draws him, he's just like, wow, is that really how I look to him, and it kind of helps. Like Bosan really helps with Kangdae's self-esteem. Like he shows interest in how he looks, but not from like a sort of superficial
Yeah.
way. Like he was constantly bullied in high school, and one of the many things was about his glasses and stuff like that. So he never wears
Mhm.
glasses until towards the end of season one, when he has no choice but to wear them because he ran out of contacts. And then as soon as Bosun is like, "You look really good with glasses," Kang Dae's just like, "Oh, I guess I'll wear them all the time then." So I
Yeah,
always get the
exactly.
compliments, because that is something that means a lot to him, because he gets better with his self-esteem, and I really tried to show that through the webtoon with how Kangdae dresses. So at
Mhm.
the beginning of the webtoon, Kangdae dresses majority in like sweatpants and stretchy shirts, and then towards the end he starts wearing like jeans and more fashion and jewelry, and he gets piercings, and he starts like wearing, you know, better looking clothes. Like he's gotten into his style. He's feel confident that he can pull off a very certain style through the course of the story. And that's more of like a subtle thing that not sure if people would notice, but that is intentional.
Oh, I
Yeah.
definitely noticed. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think also, like, in some situation, Bosan could be giving these compliments to Kangdae, and Kangdae could easily just brush them off and maintain his self-esteem of being like having a very low self-esteem. But
Yeah.
he, worked on trying to see what Bosan saw in him, like
Yeah.
on his own. Like he put effort into trying to better himself. So it wasn't just like he was relying on Bosan to give
No,
him self esteem, but he tried to put effort into seeing himself how Bosan saw him.
absolutely. Because he didn't like living the way that he was. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that I really relate to, is the low self-esteem from like difficult things in the past. It can kind of leave you scarred.
Mm-hmm.
And when people give you compliments, it's really hard to take that because you don't believe them. And it takes a lot of mental capacity and, you know, faith in yourself to be able to accept those compliments and not brush it off.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the course of the story, Kangdae really does slowly build that confidence back. And instead of just not taking the compliment or biting back, he tries to allow himself to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it comes from a genuine person like Bosun does help, because he knows, after all knowing Bosun, that he wouldn't lie to him about that for no reason.
Yeah.
So it made it a little bit easier for him to accept those compliments. And then over time, that helped with his self esteem in general, to be able to have the confidence. Also, with his writing as well, because he was always too nervous to show anybody his stories or writing, because it didn't really go well last time when he was in
Mm-hmm.
high school. People
Yeah.
just made fun of him. So even in that way, it allowed him to be more open in general. And he really worked on himself, especially towards the end of season one and in season two. He really, really worked on himself, and he wanted to be a better person. And I think that he did a good job. He
Yes.
definitely became a
Yeah.
better person for
Mm-hmm.
himself.
Yeah. And I really loved that I wanted to root for Kangdae, as, I sometimes sometimes I feel like when writers create a character, they want to give them flaws. With Kangdae, he's a grump. He doesn't treat people very well.
Yeah,
He just doesn't like people. But I love what you did where you were able to like give more depth to him than just his flaws. And I, he didn't turn into a dislikable character. I ended up liking him more and more, because I could, see him as a character want to improve and be better. And I was really, rooting for him the whole time. I was like, Kangdae, come on. Like, you can do it, man. Believe in yourself. Like, it was
I'm so glad.
definitely, huh?
I said I'm so glad. Like that makes me happy
Yeah,
to hear.
yeah. I mean, what I really also love is when I was reading it, there was a lot of things that Hosan said to Kangdae that I was like, I need to tell myself these things. It was really touching because, you know, I could I recognize that, like, I need to be doing this for myself and telling
Yeah.
myself these things. I can't, just I could see myself in Kangdae a lot,
Yeah.
and I think that just comes down to just the brilliant storytelling. And
No,
I'm not kidding, Peglo.
you're too
Like,
kind.
you need to give yourself a lot of credit because, again, it's very rare that I find a story or a webtoon that gives me such an emotional, like, impact from reading it. And, I have moments where I'm fangirling and kicking my feet and giggling, but then there's other moments where I'm like crying and getting choked up because I was just so moved by the story. And it just goes to show how amazing of a storyteller you are.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That makes me so happy to hear. It because that's
Yeah.
that's what I was hoping. Because I always say that To the Stars and Back is like it turned into my therapy comic. So what I did was I made the characters say things that I could never say to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of making the characters talk and try to encourage each other and pick each other up and use that as a way to put it back on myself because being able to believe in yourself is really really difficult, especially if you've
Mm-hmm.
gone through really horrible things in your past or you felt like you weren't worth anything. So being able to self-talk to yourself is really difficult, and I found that really hard. And I found comfort in making To the Stars and Back because I was at the beginning I was writing things that I wasn't sure if I believed in myself for myself. And then over time, the more that the characters said that, because I was making the characters say that, I found myself being kinder to myself. And I didn't blame myself for things, or I didn't get angry at myself as much. I still have a long way to go, as most people do. The
Mm-hmm.
journey never ends after a little bit. The
Yeah.
road to healing is much longer than that. But I always say that To the Stars and Back is like a love letter to my younger self. It is all the things that I wish I could have said to myself when I was younger that I didn't have the strength to. So I find it so beautiful when I get comments or DMs from people just saying how much this series offered a comfort to them and how it really helped them find themselves or be kinder to themselves or even just be more confident in themselves in their own identity or sexuality. That's why I like making comics. This is why I like sharing it, what I make. And so seeing that just, it always blows me away. It makes me really emotional to see that because that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Um, would you say that's like the most rewarding aspect to it, being a webcomic
Absolutely.
creator?
Absolutely is seeing people's reaction to it and seeing what they get out of it as well. And just it's kind of like a weird way of connecting with my audience because I'm not like actively connecting with them obviously
Mm-hmm.
because I'm here and they're there, but that's a way of me to connect through to my audience of like people who have gone through similar experiences.
Yeah. Um, I think being able to make an impact on your audience. Sorry, this is embarrassing. I'm getting all emotional.
No,
Oh
it's
no.
okay. I was getting
I'm okay.
emotional there too because I'm just like, oh my goodness, I remember why I made this series and why I was sobbing at the end of season 2.
My God. Yeah. This is embarrassing. Maybe I'll cut this out or I'll include it. I don't know. I guess I'll
No,
find
it's
out.
fine.
But yeah, I just like out of honestly, out of all of the webtoons I've read, I don't think I've read one as like what's the word I want to use as like validating as yours
I'm so glad.
because yeah, I having Kangdae face his flaws and acknowledge them, but then like being okay with like himself and learning to like love himself. I think he needed somebody to come into his life and tell him these things. And it's what I love. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I yeah, it's rewarding for you as a creator to like make that impression and that connection with your audience, but as also as a reader, it's also very rewarding to like be able to have that like little gift of the connection, the validation, the you know, just being like it's okay to be a human and it's okay to
Yeah,
make mistakes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry.
I always say that mistakes make you a human. And it's not about the mistakes that you make, but how you react to them and how you get up off the ground from them and what you do with them. So don't feel bad about making mistakes, but focus on how you come away from that. And that's something that I wanted to show with Kangdae because I remember like when I was posting the first section of season one, where Kangdae was just really horrible and it just kept getting worse because he kept just like being rude and he yelled at Bosan for no reason.
Mhm.
Like he
Mhm.
just got worse and worse. I didn't want it to seem hopeless
Mhm.
because I wanted people to see Kangdae actively change. And I just find it really interesting that the stark change between like, oh, at the beginning everyone's just like, oh, why is this guy such an asshole, like why is he so mean, like what's going on here, versus like towards season two, like in season two everyone's just like, oh my god, Kang Dae's such a supportive boyfriend, he's so kind and
Mhm.
he's so nice. And I'm like, that for me is rewarding because that's what I wanted to show. I wanted to show the progression of Kande's character as he becomes a really supportive person, the opposite of how he started off. And with Bosun, it was important for me to do a little bit of the opposite, which was at the beginning of To the Stars and Back, he seems like a very bubbly, outgoing. He seems like he has no issues, like no problems. He's very level-headed, and then towards the end he's very vulnerable and he's very lost and he's not sure what to do and he needs a lot of help. And that is something that was really important to me, was to show that how Bosun uses that as a crutch to hide his feelings.
Mhm.
And that's why I wanted to show how through the series Bosun starts to break down a little bit. Like he can't really hide the feelings as much as he could at the beginning with a smile. He
Mhm.
starts to open up more to Kangdae and he starts to allow himself to feel the negative sadness emotions more openly instead of in a closed off environment where he can't disappoint anybody for having those feelings. Because one of the main focuses of To the Stars and Back was also to show that people deal with trauma and issues differently.
Mhm.
There's no real one way of people dealing with something that happened to them in the past, and that everybody has moments where they go backwards or moments where they are really struggling to kind of deal with the emotions that they have. And some people, like Kang Dae, use anger and rudeness as a crutch to not be hurt by people anymore. And people like Bosan brush off everything and use a smile and jokes to hide how they really feel. And I wanted to show that both types of people are valid and that both types of people can move on from that and can get better. And that neither trauma is more severe than the other, because everybody deals with things differently, and everybody, regardless of any comparisons, you should not be comparing, because what you went through is very real. It doesn't have to be like anybody else's. And that the way that you deal with it, you can get through it.
Yeah, I think so many people relate to that. There's so many people that are dealing with similar stuff that Kangdae and Bosan are dealing with on a daily basis. It was really good representation into that journey of healing for them both, you know, and it gives a ray of hope for the people that are, you know, feeling like there is not a lot of hope and there's, you know, it's definitely, you know, it gives that representation that things can change for the better and they can improve.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's really impactful as well.
Yeah. I know now I'm thinking about it and I'm just like, I realize how impactful this series was for me as a person. Personally, even like
Yeah.
aside from posting it, just the characters and the story itself was such a comfort. And so it is kind of bittersweet saying goodbye to them. You know, when I drew that last episode, the finale,
Mm-hmm.
I was perfectly fine through majority of it, and then I got halfway through coloring and I just wept.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. I gotta finish the episode.
Crying, just still
Yeah,
coloring flats.
exactly. It was so emotional to see that, because that ending, that finale episode, was something that I saw like panel for panel in my brain all the way back in 2021. That was something that I knew that I wanted exactly the way that it was. And I'm so glad that I got to make it exactly the way that it was. Because sometimes when you do episodes, you have an idea and it doesn't turn out the way that you want
Yeah.
it to. So I'm really glad that that came out that way. But that was so emotional because that was one of the first, like, big scenes that I wanted. Because I always try to plan for, like, how the story ends so that I have something to work towards.
Yeah.
And that was exactly the way that I pictured it. And so when I read that episode or I look at that episode, I get really emotional because that is such a pinnacle point of realizing, damn, it's over and I have to
Yeah.
say goodbye to them.
Yeah. Especially after being with this story for so long and
Yeah.
being with these characters. And yeah, it's valid that you'd be emotional. I would be too.
Yeah. It's quite bittersweet. I mean, I'm a bit better now because I've had time to process the feelings, but it will always be something really special to me.
Yeah. And it honestly, you know, I'm not the only one, but it'll always be a really special thing for your readers as well.
It makes me so glad. I said this before, but like it's mind blowing and just so amazing how people were able to connect with this story. I never thought in a million years that I would be able to make something that connects with people like this. I feel very grateful.
So, what would you tell a creator that is creating a webtoon? How would you tell them to go about writing a story like that or a webcomic?
I have two bits of advice for that, actually. First one is make sure that what you're making, whatever story it may be, is something that you're really passionate about, that you love. Because the road to making webtoons or comics or manga or whatever it is that you choose to do in a story format is going to be really challenging, both emotionally and physically, mentally. Like, it is hard making a comic. And you're going to go through a lot of rough moments where you will feel like you want to throw in the towel, or you will feel like, I can't do it. This is too much. This is so stressful. And what makes it really worthwhile and motivating to get through those hard moments is that it's a story that you love, that you really want to tell, that there's a passion for that you want to put out there for others to see, or even if you are making it just for yourself, that it's something that you want to do. And making a story that you think that other people will like, and only what you think other people will like, without that personal connection to yourself, you're going to probably run out of a lot of steam, and you're probably not going to have the attention to detail of making sure that like characters are the way that you want them to be if you're not passionate about it. So that's my first bit of advice, is make sure you love what you're making. And secondly is a little bit more on a technical scale, and full disclaimer, if you're just doing this as a hobby and it's just for fun, anything like that, like just you're doing it in your own time, this is not applicable. But if you want to make it in a more professional sense, or you want to make this your career, or if you are aiming to try to make it a Webtoon original or get printed, plan your plots. Make sure that you know what you're doing in the story. So you don't have to make it super detailed, like a script for a play where every single word is on the nose, like exactly the way that you want it to be. But definitely plan each of the plot beats. Make sure that you know exactly what direction it's going, and plan your endings. Because if you don't plan what you want to happen in the end, what's going to happen is you're just going to skew off in a random direction, and then you're going to find it really difficult to course correct. And before you know it, you've gone off the plot, or what you wanted the plot to be, and it's no longer going to make sense. So make sure that each of your arcs are clearly outlined, what you want to happen, and have your endings. If anyone is telling you to make it up as you go along, that is the worst advice, because no professional author makes it up as they go along. Look at all
Mhm.
the novelists, look at all the professional comics, look at all of like the animes, plan your plots, make sure that you know what's happening. But again, if you're just doing it for fun and it's your
Yeah.
hobby, you do whatever you want, have fun with it.
Yeah.
But this is strictly for like, if you really want to take this to the next level, like please plan. And also it'll be way less stressful. So I really encourage you to just, know what's going to happen in your comic. And it doesn't mean that like you can't switch or change things as you go. Nothing is set in stone, but always keep that guided path so that you know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Um, and I think it's also important to say, um, if people are like wanting more clarification, are there any resources you would recommend them go look into? Any like online resources or something that they could do to kind of learn more about how to create a compelling story and like how to create a plot that makes sense or anything like that?
Well, I didn't specifically look into. Well, I mean, I've looked into like how to write plots and what to do, but I don't really have any that I would sort of pinpoint and give like the reference to. But definitely like look into it yourself, into the art of storytelling and learning how to structure each of the arcs. And the best way that you can do that, this is how I learn personally, is that I learn by uh, watching or reading something and then doing it. So, what I like to do is if I read a manga or I watch something, I'll pay attention to each of the arcs, each of the plot points. And what you can do is you can kind of note down how the plot kind of plays out and just kind of look at the structure of that. especially with stories that are very close to what you hope to do in your webtoon. So you're not going to look at like a slice of life anime for your thriller horror. You
Mhm.
try to go within where you're going to
Yeah.
put your series. So just try to look at the way that they do it. I learn a lot by watching. So that's kind of where I get my inspiration from, is by watching and reading things. And also, this is like a really strange thing, but I like, the song Bohemian Rhapsody, right?
Yep.
And you know how in each moment of like each section of Bohemian Rhapsody, there's different sections of the song.
Mhm.
I structure my stories similar to the way that the song is structured, because it starts off kind of slow and then it gets a little
Interesting.
bit more intense, and then there's the rock section towards
Mhm.
the end that is like the big climax, and then it calms back down.
Mm.
Not every story is going to be the same,
Mhm.
but when I think about my plots, I think about it in the structure of how Bohemian Rhapsody is kind of laid out.
Yeah, that those are really good pieces of advice I feel like a lot of creators will benefit from, especially if they're not sure where to start with
Yeah.
storytelling. So, let's get into our fan submitted questions. You had so many. You had
I'm
so
so
many questions.
sorry.
It was amazing. It was
Okay.
amazing because I had so many options to choose from. There was a lot of plot related questions and I didn't
Yeah.
want to include them in case of
Yeah.
spoilers, but okay, let's start. Okay, Melva Groot asked in season 1 of To the Stars and Back, what's the song that plays in Kang Dae's memories and what is the genre of the song?
I think I've gotten this question a few times. So the song that plays is actually Bosan's favorite song, and it's "My Girl" by The Temptations.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
song. That's classic.
it's one of my favorite songs, and of course, I gave Bosan that's his favorite song. It's also the
Mhm.
same song that plays at his birthday party.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that's kind of why it jogs Kang Dae's memory, and he gets that.
Mhm.
That's the first look that we get at an actual flashback, not
Mhm.
a dream.
Yeah.
By the way, as like a side note, those dream episodes were some of my favorites to draw because I got to be really creative with
Yeah. I really
them.
like the way you composed all those scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I mean, you can put this as, I don't know if it'll be a spoiler, but like at the very first dream that he has, because at the time nobody knew that it was Bosun in those
Mhm.
flashbacks. But the very first dream that he had, where he dreams about the song playing, like the music playing, and he walks into the classroom, and then he gets scared by Bosun saying, "Hello, neighbor."
Mhm.
That was like me telling everybody, "Hey, everybody, Bosun is the one that's always in his dream." And that's kind of, yeah, that's Kande's subconscious, like his subconscious being like,
His
"Yeah, that's
subconscious
the
knew.
person." Yeah.
That is amazing.
But I love that song. I love
Yeah.
old music like that. I'm a sucker for that, especially old love songs.
I love it. I didn't know you had a particular song in mind when you
Yeah.
were creating that scene. So, yeah. Okay. Claire Dog the Cool Girl asked, I mean, we kind of cover this, but how are you feeling after it ended?
Yeah, like I said, it was super emotional when it ended. For me personally, it fully ended when it went up on FastPass, because that was when I stopped drawing it, obviously. So for me, that was my big, like, moment. But for a lot of people who couldn't pay for the FastPass, it ended when it went up for free. But by that time, I had like processed my emotions a little bit. It was still really emotional when it went up for free, but like I feel like the brunt of the emotions was that day when it went up on FastPass.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like Renya and I celebrated. We were reading through the first season of To the Stars and Back together, and just looking at all of the growth that the characters have had, and also the art, because the art has changed so much since then. It was really
Mm-hmm.
fun to like read through that, and that in itself was emotional. We were both crying.
Oh,
And then it went up and I cried some more,
yeah.
and I just got bombarded with just overwhelming support and emotions from the finale, and people being really sad and also happy, and I feel like that's kind of how it felt for me, sad but happy.
Yeah.
I love how it turned out. I Looking back, I know that there's probably a lot that I could fix now, like because my skills have gotten a lot better
Mhm.
and I know what I'm doing more now, and I want to get even better at writing. But regardless of that, I'm really happy with it. I'm so proud of this series.
Good. That makes me happy to hear. Yeah. So Leo Jack asked, if there is a To the Stars and Back live action, who is your dream cast?
First of all, I would cry and die simultaneously.
Get a Netflix deal.
Exactly. Isn't that like the big dream for everyone? But I actually don't have a Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about those tiny details because I feel like it would hurt my soul. Because if I get like
Mm-hmm.
too emotionally connected to that, and also, I mean, who knows if it would ever happen? It probably won't happen. But if it ever did happen, I don't want to be like dead set on people and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it doesn't happen. So I don't want to get too attached to anything like that. But I know, like, obviously, I know my characters, so I would hope that if there ever was a live action, that they just keep true to the characters as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I definitely fantasize about my series being animes a lot more than live
Mm-hmm.
action. I feel like in my head, that's how it looks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. I think an anime would be more appealing than a live action. To be honest, just because I'm so used to seeing them in 2D, I feel like it'd be kind of
Yeah.
jarring to see them in like real
And
people.
also, like, a totally different color palette, because obviously you don't have, like, pink, orange
True.
people in real life. So. And honestly, in my head, like, this is different for everybody because obviously everybody else has a different accent. But obviously, in my head, they all have Aussie accents.
Yeah.
But that's not canon. They live in a fictional place, so
Right.
there's
Right.
no actual canon, so it could be anything. But for me, in my head, they all have Aussie accents.
Nice. I can imagine Bosan's accent, like Aussie accent, but higher pitched,
Yeah.
just because he's small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, he definitely has a more higher pitched voice than Kangde. I always imagine
Yeah.
Kangde with like a very low
Yeah.
monotone voice, and then Bosan is like more high pitched, not like super high pitched where it's like like squeaky
Right.
because
Right.
he's still a 20-year-old man, but it's definitely higher and it's a lot more smooth.
Yeah.
So that's
Like
kind of how
softer.
I exactly
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Unforeseen Girl asked, what was Kangdae and Bosan's favorite memory together?
Ooh, I would say technically, I call it their first date, which is the book signing arc where they go
Mm-hmm.
into the city and try
Mm-hmm.
to get the book signed. For me, that's they like to see that as their favorite memory together because it was their first official outing together and they really bonded over that because before then they had that rocky start. So this was
Yeah.
like their way of starting fresh, starting new. And that was a very fond memory for them. So much so that there's a picture that I always show from that day. It's the one from the finale. Like Kangdae has that on as his phone background, and that's one of the first pictures that Bosan puts on the corkboard in the club
Mm-hmm.
room.
Yeah.
So that's a really special moment for them.
Yeah.
Probably their favorite moment. Yeah.
That's really cute. It's adorable. So Emily asked, did he have any ideas that he wished he showed in To the Stars and Back? How did Reina help condense his ideas to make what To the Stars and Back is now?
There were quite a few ideas and arcs that I wish I could have included. But this was very early on in the ideas stage. So before To the Stars and Back kind of became what it is now, when I decided that I wanted it to be more of a fluffy slice of life. I half of me is like, I kind of wish I could have shown more like silly comedy or funny arcs, but it would have deviated from the tone I was trying to set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm planning on using those comedy moments for other stories, so I didn't have to completely throw them out. But that's something that originally I had more in like the not even in the Canvas version, but the very first version on Instagram. It was going to be more of like a silly comedy where Bosun just kind of pops up and annoys Kang Dae for the whole thing without the romance. It actually didn't have romance in the original version. That came
Hmm.
much later.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do wish I showed a little bit more comedy because comedy's kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
Renya didn't really help writing it. I just sometimes bounce an idea off her, and she does the same with her webtoon. But we have our own projects, and we don't usually overstep, so we kind of keep to our own thing.
Hmm.
But I had to do a lot of condensing. There was a lot I would have liked to do, but they just wouldn't have worked out plot wise. But that's okay. I'm happy with how it is anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Tyler asked, "Are there any plot holes that bother you?"
Yes. The ghost arc. I wish I got more time to show more about that. I actually had
Yeah.
so many spooky ideas, but again, I realized it would change the tone too much.
Hmm.
And I only had a certain number of episodes for season one, so
Yeah.
I couldn't really go over that. And I had to make the choice: what's more important, showing ghost spooky mystery or the genuine connection growth with Kang Dae and Bosun? And I felt like, for the sake of the story, I have to go with that. But I will confirm the ghost is real. It is a real ghost. And I was going to show more about it. It was going to be more of a mystery arc, but it was already too long. And the reason why the ghost only like showed up around Kyo or messed with him was because she had a crush on him.
uh,
That's why she terrorized only him, and literally nobody else saw the ghost.
Amazing.
But she's still there. She's still watching.
Yeah,
She's just more calm. She's not evil. She's just a gremlin.
that's great. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so our last fan question, Man's First Disobedience asked, "What artist does Peglo look up to?"
Sorry, that caught me off guard.
Sorry,
These usernames that you'll pick.
I didn't pick them.
No, not you, like my audience. What is
I
wrong
know, I know.
with you? What artist do I look up to? Quite a few. I love the author who makes 19 Days, Olshan.
Mm.
I love the author that makes Gokuro Kugai, Yuto Sano. Two major ones that have influenced my style as a whole. And then some others like the art from the two anime films, Your Name and Suzume. I love
Oh,
them so much, both of
Suzume
them.
so much. Okay,
So good.
I love it.
And Death Note. Recently, also, The Summer Hikaru died. Highly recommend.
Which one?
Studio. The Summer Hikaru died. It's a horror BL. Yeah.
Oh,
I know, right? I've been wanting something like that for a while. Studio Ghibli and Avatar: The Last Airbender.
love Avatar: Last Airbender. Not the
Me
live
too.
action.
No, I don't. The animated one was actually a huge inspiration since the beginning because I watched that when it was coming out on TV when I was a little
Yeah, I did
kid. That
too.
was like the first big inspiration that I got for my own art. And it
Yeah,
still carries through now. Like, I'm still inspired by it.
I could see with the warm palettes from Avatar.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of like the fight scenes in
Mm.
Avatar: The Last Airbender so good, but
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of that has also inspired some of the fight scenes in Superfish as well,
Mm.
which people will see. But that's one of my main inspirations for the fight scenes that will happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't include that. Can you tell us anything about Superfish?
uh, yeah, definitely. I can give like a little summary of what it is. It's about it's about a guy named DJ. He's like a schoolboy. He lives kind of an average life until he's kind of unwillingly thrown into a world full of magic, supernatural beings, and a lot of danger. He meets a male witch named Superfish who tries to help and protect him. and they end up developing romantic feelings for each other through the course of the story as they're trying to deal with all of the mess that happens around them. It's a supernatural boys love romance with action, fantasy, comedy, and angst. A lot of angst, be warned. It's not as fluffy and as calm as To the Stars and Back, and also some horror elements, which I'm really
Mm,
excited about.
yeah.
And also the world building. This has a lot of world building in it, so I really got to like go in depth, and of course their relationship that will develop. I'm really excited to get started on it. I get started on it soon, actually. I've wanted to make this webtoon for the last 7 years.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. I'm
this
so glad you get to finally do it.
I know this is like the one that I was just like, if I don't live for very long, this is the one series that I want to finish. So I'm like, I have to do this, or I will feel unaccomplished with my life.
Yeah.
There's no launch date yet, but I know it'll be next year. I'm aiming for next year.
Well, I can speak for all of the fans. We are patiently waiting. We'll wait as long as it takes.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
It sounds like my cup of tea for sure.
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay, so that is all of the questions I have for you today. PEGL0, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was an honor to talk to you and talk about To the Stars and Back and your journey to becoming a webcomic creator. And I'm very excited for all of your future projects and what you have in store.
Thank you so much for having this. This was such a blast. I had such a lovely time. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. I will plug all of PEGL0's links in the show notes. I'll include his Instagram. I'll include links to The Stars and Back. You also launched merch on the Webtoon shop, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just recently.
Okay, yeah, I'll plug that as well. Any of you who love To the Stars and Back and want some cool merch, he's got all sorts of really cool stuff in there. So if you found this podcast inspiring or informative or entertaining, please give us a like, give us a follow. You can follow us on our socials at The Webtoon Wave. Go follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts coming soon. Thank you for tuning in. Stay creative, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time.